this off while I talk, but anyway, I hope I'm not contaminating you. And I think when you have a cold, you probably should eat curried squash soup. I haven't tasted anything in 6 days.
Oh,
For me, that is absolute misery. But I was making stock today, and I could just barely smell the chicken stock cooking. So I think it's getting better. This is just a really easy soup. And kind of what it's probably the more important message that I have is about squash, about winter squash. I checked out squash from the co-op today. I have to return it. But I asked Ben, the produce manager, if I could bring some squash to you. And maybe at the end we'll go look at it. And this time, it's late in the year. They're still getting some coming in, but it's more late than usual. In the fall, the variety is much wider. Well, you know, have you been to Gordon's Pumpkins or Shoes in the fall? There's just bajillions of them, and they're beautiful. And most of them are edible. Some of them, not so much. Some of them are gourds. You don't eat them. What I was looking online today, and I was thinking all these squash, and then this squash is this way, and this squash is that way. But you know, I don't think it makes a whit of difference which squash you use. Winter squash. Winter squash is very different than summer squash. One is a little drier, one's a little nuttier, one's a little sweeter. If it isn't a sweet one, you know, you can always put a tablespoon of brown sugar in your soup. And that's just kind of what I think probably makes most difference is the size and for what you want to use it for, and handling it, because they're heavy and they're hard to cut, and when they're big, you know, it just depends on what kind of wrestling match you want to get into. Butternut is just, you know, it's just a good standby. It probably isn't the most flavorful and the most this or the most that, but you know, there's a deal for you. There's just the tiniest bit of a butternut that isn't flesh, that isn't meat. So I think butternut is just fine. I guess I'll talk about spaghetti squash just to get it out of here. Have you eaten spaghetti squash? Do you cook it?
Yeah.
It's, oh Lordy, I don't think I wrote it.
Easy.
Pardon me?
Very easy.
Yeah. It's just like this. Mostly squash you cut in half, put it face down on a cookie sheet, and cook it for however long you cook it. You cook it for 25 minutes and pinch it and see what it's like, and maybe 45. And if you get into some of those bigger ones, maybe a little longer. I was going to take a fork. I don't know, can you see that? It's really good, just treat it like spaghetti. Just with red sauce and cheese and Parmesan and olives. Somebody had a thing, but I just wanted to make sure you knew what it looked like inside. It really is spaghetti-ish. When it's this yellow, it's winter squashier. earlier in the year, it's more like zucchini in flavor, and it's crisper. And the noodles are a little bit crisper, so it changes over time. But it's very nice stuff. And there was I don't know what happened to it. I very carefully saved it. But there was a recipe plastered on the side of the spaghetti squash that looked really good to me. And it was just this with olives and sauce and cheese, and mix it all together and put it in the oven. I think it was fresh mozzarella or something. There's an easy dinner. The other thing is, if you're cooking for kids, I think you can mix the squash noodles with spaghetti noodles. Some kids you have to trick into eating vegetables, and some you don't. But you can just toss them together, and they might not notice. You can take the seeds out before you bake it or after. It just really doesn't matter. Have you seen the long neck butternut? They're really good. They sometimes, really literally, they're this long, and then they still just have a small bulb at the end where the seeds are. So they're really a deal. Gordon's has them. You probably shoes do too in the fall. I didn't take the meat out. I was going to do it. You can make this soup with baked squash. It's probably the easiest way to make it. You can buy squash that's already pureed, frozen. You can buy squash that's cubed and frozen. You can take your squashes and cook them and freeze the flesh, by the 2 cups or the pound or however you want to do it, in Ziplocs. It's pretty neat stuff, and it's almost instant soup if you have it in the freezer. It's way better than most instant soups you will find. It's just terribly nutritious. It's vitamin A and beta carotenes, and probably if I ate more of this than I have recently, I wouldn't have a cold. Maybe, I don't know. I was just going to see how much came out of this. They were about the same size, right around a pound. So I'd be a pound and a half. I could have cooked this more, but it's going to cook in the soup, so no problem. Yeah, that's about half of what I need, and it's a half a squash, so there you go. One of these will make a recipe of soup. Let's see, start with that. If you push the button, it tells you different things, so you have to keep pushing it until it starts telling you what you want to know. What I want to know is what temperature it is. So this is at 300. I use the butter for flavor, if you use all butter, it'll burn. So I use a teaspoon of butter. The squash picks up all flavors in a wonderful way, so it'll pick up that little bit of butter. But I'm going to put a neutral oil with it so the butter doesn't brown. I mean, sometimes you want the butter to brown, but oh dear, I have... Colds make you stupid. I just want to say that. I think I will. Whenever you're cooking, you should get everything ready first, right? Right. Okay, let's do it. I cut up half of it. I've seen some of you before, and so we talked about how to cut onions in a nice, even, easy way. I cut the onion, cut the stem end off, and then cut it that direction, and I'm going to follow the arc of the onion so that, and however big I want it this is probably between 1/4 and 1/2 inch. It's going to be a nice little dice, and but I can control that. If I want little weeny pieces, I make the cuts really close, and if I don't care. And I don't even have to go through all this because I'm going to puree it. And so all I'm doing now is just, I want things to cook at the same rate, so that's why I'm bothering. My friend Diane works for the extension, and she's about to do a program on food waste. So she's probably sitting there getting ready to weigh what the April 6th?
April 6th. Yeah.
April 6th at the port. And there are going to be a bunch of things happening, one of which is going to be a pop-up at the bread lab. And that's always a good thing.
Yeah.
Okay, the other thing I want to get ready, and of course I forgot my peeler. I have a hard time finding good cooking apples. I can't smell it. That was a joke, because I can't smell a thing. But it's about the best way to find the best apple at the store. I don't know if they get upset with you when you do that. Because the store guys don't know. They'll say, oh yeah, you cook with Granny Smiths. Yuck! Granny Smiths are sour, and they hold their shape, and that's what they're useful for, but they don't taste very good. Or I'm opinionated. You can always argue with me. This is a gala, but the last time I did that, I just went through, and then all of a sudden, here was one that just, it was perfume. It was just apple. Whoa, that's the one I want. Johnny Golds are pretty good. Things like wine saps and others that, they have the best variety at the co-op because they get them locally and they get them from a whole bunch of different orchards, and they're not Red Delicious or something Red Not Delicious. So that's your best place to find what you want, but they don't know any more than any of the rest of them which ones are the best ones. Honey Crisps are good eating, but now they're doing Cosmic Crisps. And Cosmic Crisps have a really heavy skin that I don't think is all that good. You have to just keep looking. The apple gives the soup probably a little bit of tartness. It wouldn't hurt to put a Granny Smith in here if you had a real sweet squash. But I like one with more apple flavor.
And since you puree it, it doesn't really matter the texture. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Well, yeah, but you want one that cooks down.
Okay.
And that's, grannies don't. And sometimes you don't, you know, you want the apple to hold its shape for some dishes or whatever, but I like apple pie where the pieces are cooked down. And again, that's just personal preference. You could also leave the peels on for your no waste. I like to be able to make a really smooth soup when I'm done, so that's why I don't use the peels. The peels have wonderful pectin, and there's really, it's just kind of an aesthetic reason that I don't use it. Okay, now let's get back on the road here. Do not make soup in a pan like this. This is a silly pan to make a soup in, but you can see what I'm doing way easier in this pan than in a saucepan. So that's, don't go out of here saying, wow, I better get a wok to make a soup in. The thing is, if you made this soup with just squash that you got out of the freezer and some stock or some water and some curry, and you could make a pretty darn good soup without doing the flavor things, the onions and the apples. Pardon me?
Do the apples give it more flavor?
They do, and they give it a little tartness and a little more fruitiness, I think. Those aren't very specific words, but they're not necessary, but they're awfully good, and why not? It says curry likes to be heated, toasted, and so I'm going to put that in with, this is just an ordinary grocery store curry. If you're into curry and you want to do a deal, you can try different kinds. From different places. World Spice has if you you've ever, the World Spices on Western Avenue, right below Pike Street Market in Seattle. And it's just such a nice place to go into, and the smell just makes you, I don't know what, drool.
Yeah.
And they have, you can buy, curry is a mix of spices, and you can buy curry with the whole spices and bring them home and grind them up as you use them. I mean, if you really want to do a number on curry, or if you love curry and you're just really into it. But grocery store curry makes an awfully good soup also, so mostly I don't bother. Now I think I'm supposed to add the apples and stir it. Anybody who wants to come up here and stick their nose in the pot, can you smell? Because I think that the smell, if you've got good smellers, it'll start, you'll pick up the apple maybe, or maybe you won't. I'm just coating the apple with the curry. The onion is just turned a little translucent, just a little bit. You don't, this is going to cook for a while, so it doesn't have to be completely cooked. I think I will. It's always better to make soup with stock, and that always means always. There's plenty of flavor in the squash, in the apples, in the onions. This is a soup that's not going to fuss at you if you use water. So I'm going to use water. I think it says 2 cups. 2 cups. And I'm just going to let that start. I'll put this squash in it. But if you want to peel and cut a squash, put it in a 350 oven for 15 minutes, and you can tell it when you look at it. It's then easier to peel, easier to cut. And some of those big ones, like the kabocha, is a really hard, it's even little, but it's a really, really hard squash, and it's really, really good. But you can also do 5 in the microwave before you start. Just stick the whole thing in the oven. And it's not, you don't have to poke it or anything, because you're not going to do enough to matter. That is worth the price of this class. In fact, it's worth a lot more than that, because if you've wrestled with a squash, you know what I'm talking about. I have this wonderful spoon. Oh, here. I don't know what garage sale or where it came from, but this is so precious, this spoon. It's an important thing in my life. And one of the things it's very good for is taking the seeds out of the squash. You can toast these seeds too if you're into toasting seeds. You know, like a pumpkin, you do that with pumpkins maybe. I never seem to get them toasted enough to please me, so I don't. But if I had kids, I would do it just because it would be fun. And if I didn't want to waste anything, that's another thing you could. when the squash is shaped like this, I'm gonna cut it where it starts to flare out. That's still fairly hard. And then I'm gonna cut the end off. You always gotta make yourself a flat place for safety reasons. And then just and if it makes you nervous with a big knife, it works okay with a small knife. I'd rather use a big knife. I don't keep my little knives very sharp, but I do keep my big ones sharp. So it'll take a little longer to cook if you do it this way, if you cut these guys into cubes. It won't be instant like it will be with the baked squash, but it's really, I don't think the resulting soup, I don't think it makes any difference. And you want to cut these up pretty small, unless you want it to cook for a long time and then cut them up big. This is such a forgiving soup. You can make it be any way you want it. And don't get any skin in there. Because squash, well, some squash skin is tender enough to eat, but not butternut, at least in my experience. The other thing is, don't measure this and then put this in the fridge. If it, just put it all in the soup. There's no, you know, it's forgiving. It might take a little more water, but it's not going to change the quality of the soup. And refrigerator compost is a pain. It's, do you ever go in the vegetable drawer and find a half an onion that's beyond whatever? So most soups are forgiving, and this is not safe what I'm doing. I shouldn't be showing you this.
Do you ever peel it before you cook it? Like,
That's what I'm doing.
oh, this isn't cooked?
No, this,
Oh,
no,
okay.
yeah.
Oh,
No, I just wanted to show you both kind of what you were up against. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. To bake it. Of course, it's longer in the oven, and that isn't as green. You can actually cook it in the microwave or in one of those monster pot things, or what. You have to be careful, I think, if it's under pressure, because you can cook the dickens out of it and then not have a very nice result if you're not careful. If your wing's out, your thumb's in. That's not physics exactly, but it's physicals. And so save your thumb. smells good, doesn't it?
Mhm.
Even I can smell that. Okay, so let's, and you can see this isn't exactly cut all that evenly. Doesn't matter. And we'll put this in at 2 because, again, it really doesn't matter. It's hopping around on its own. I mean, this is going to be it. This is going to cook, and then you're going to put a little salt in it, a little pepper, and it's going to be soup. It's one of those things, and it doesn't particularly get better like tomorrow. You know how some things are better when they sit overnight? It's really not true of this. What you see is what you get at the end of it. You just want to bring it to a boil. So this, oh, I have to show you my new favorite thing. I mean, if you're a certain age, you've already seen them. They're little shower caps for bowls. I have used so much less saran wrap since I found these guys. They're at the dollar store, and there's 17 in here, and they're 3 different sizes. The little ones I put over the end of a lemon, a half a lemon, and I put this over the squash. They're just wonderful. I gave them to everybody in my family for Christmas. Anyway, it upsets me to use great sheets of saran wrap and then throw it in the garbage, and I know right where it's going to end up, and I know where it's going to be when my grandchildren's grandchildren. So anyway, pretty nice deals. Okay, now one of the cheating things I do, and I usually do this at the end, I keep a can of apple juice on my freezer door. Apple juice concentrate, not apple juice. And if it, in the end, if it needs to be a little sweeter or a little more apple-y or whatever it needs that this could fix, I just put a tablespoon or 2 of apple juice concentrate in it. But sometimes, if I have a can of hard cider, I'll put that in while I'm cooking it. Or soft cider, it doesn't have to be hard. But
you still use the apple.
oh yeah, I still use the apple, but sometimes you just, as I say, it just enhances it. It's not exactly cheating, just a little bit cheating.
How much do you put in?
With the concentrate, I put it in by the tablespoon. So, maybe a tablespoon and then taste it, and maybe another one. Probably not more than that. And if I have a can of cider, I just use that as part of the liquid. I think I can leave that simmer if you want to come and look at the squash that I checked out from the co-op. Oh, let me get a basket. What did I do with it?
But then you puree it, right?
Yeah. I'm gonna pirouette with one of these. Did anybody see what I did with my mask? Oh well, I'll just try not to breathe on you.
These would be a bear to cut into. They really are.
Let me get my sheet. I need to cheat. This is an acorn. I had the worst time getting good acorns. Everybody loves them. I love them, but they keep being watery and stringy, and I don't know how to choose well. But they're wonderful squash. My favorite, and kind of a sure bet, is the delicata. And you can just cut them in half. Now there's a huge pocket in there. This isn't a deal. Those butternut. And well, if you had a whole bunch of rhododendron in your garden, you might make soup out of them. These are more just for a side dish. Or they're really good under things like lamb curry or something that you would put, use rice. Just put it in one of these and it's really good. And you can eat the skins of these. Yeah, that I discovered that because I thought, no, I don't eat skins. Then you really can. And when I was looking online at some of these other ones, they'll say that you can eat the skin. I would do it gingerly. I wouldn't just cut it up and stick it in my mouth. This is a kabocha, which is a Japanese squash. It would be that. I made notes. It's very sweet, it's very hard. The flesh is dry. And that doesn't matter because you can always, make up for it with liquid of one sort or another. But just know that it's going to be dry. They say it tastes like a combination of pumpkin and sweet potato. It's really flavorful squash. Do you roast that after you cut it? Yeah, you can roast it, or I've done it where you cut it in cubes and make it into a hot salad. It's just, and this makes just wonderful soup. Because it's so flavorful. Well, I thought it was related to a red curry, K-U-R-I, but a red curry is related to a Hubbard, which is I grew up with. Yeah. Did you all grow up with Hubbards? They're big, honking, pale green, and they're just wonderful. This one, when I went to the co-op this afternoon, they had just gotten those in, and that's a Jara, J-A-R-R-A-H, and I didn't have time to look it up. But this is a sweetmeat, and sweetmeats are just wonderful eating. It's a Northwest heirloom. It's a very good keeper, and that's a big deal too, because sometimes they last all winter in a fairly cool spot if you keep turning them around, because otherwise you pick it up and you've got a rotten bottom, and that's not very nice. And this one is a Tatsu Kabuto. Guess guess what? Japan. I think they do a lot in Japan. It's earthy, not as sweet as a butternut. It's a kabocha butternut cross. Who knew? Sweet, dense, and firm with crisp. So, and these, I got these all from the co-op, so you want to experiment with them. One thing I found is, well, you have to get rid of the stem when you cut it, because those stems are like branches of trees. Yeah, you gotta get that off before you start. And one of the ways that I do it, I'm just telling you, I'm not recommending it. She knows me. I just hit the stem part on the edge of the counter and it flies.
You use the hammer.
Yeah.
Or a hammer, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and it's,
I struggled with that. We've got one knife and it takes me
no, yeah, don't even think about a knife with a stem. Get rid of that stem any way you can. But then, if you stab the squash, you know, after the stem's on, if you stab it down, if you cut it and then push on it, it's easier to cut. But something like those, like one of those great big ones, leave it in the oven for a whole for 20 minutes or 25 minutes. It just makes your life easier. Do whatever makes your life easier. That's a good thing. Yeah. You might copy it. Don't get this. A whole bunch of people have it. And I don't want anyone else to get it. Okay.
Or you can just smell that.
Hmm?
Can you just smell it?
Yeah. And the thing is, if you don't like curry, there's about 6 million other things you can do with squash soup. And, you know, use the apples or not. But, well, if I were making this at home, I would definitely put a lot of ginger in it because I just love ginger. And I would chop at least a tablespoon, probably a generous tablespoon. And if I didn't like curry, I would put 2 tablespoons of ginger in it. And you really get a wonderful ginger squash flavor. It goes together because of the sweetness of the squash.
Would you add the ginger when you added like the curry and warm it
Yeah.
up? Okay.
Can you do half and half? Half curry and half ginger?
No, I would do a whole bunch of both of them.
Okay.
Yeah, I would, with my tablespoon of curry, I'd put a tablespoon of ginger in it.
Okay.
Because ginger is one of the spices that's in curry, so, you know, it's compatible. You might want to put a little, well, I'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, oh yeah, I told you about that. Mexican, and there's a wonderful Mexican recipe in that, in your little booklet, where you cook the squash with poblano chilies, and that whole flavor profile is wonderful. You can add cumin and chili powder to this instead of curry, and whatever chilies you want to put in there. Guajillo is just a beautiful, fruity, dried chili. What about green chilies, but I don't know why not. but just a chili powder like an ancho powder, which is real Mexican flavor to me, would be great. And then any of the warming spices, you know, this, you would not put those with curry necessarily, but spices like nutmeg, allspice, cinnamon, or just a little teaspoon of pumpkin pie spice. Those spices are really nice with squash, because squash or pumpkins are squash, and it's those wonderful flavors. Careful with the cloves. Add them by a pinch. It'll be good, and you want them there, but you don't want them to take over. And especially with that, but even with this, cream or coconut milk, I would guess it's the fat. I don't know the science for it. And just a little bit will make it happen. If you don't want a lot of fat in your soup, just do it like a quarter of a cup or a half a cup of coconut milk. For some reason, it just pulls the flavors together, and they sing. You could use Thai spice. I got Thai coconut milk. You could use Thai spices in here too, like lemongrass and whatever, galangal and all that stuff. It's just a really, really, really good basic base for a wonderful soup. If I'd made this with all baked squash, it would be done by now, but then the apples wouldn't be cooked, so I don't really care. This will be really thick, and at any point where it's too thick, you just add a little water or stock. There's also no reason not to put a handful of yellow or red lentils in there, depending on, you know, if you want to keep making it more and more hearty. Can of tomatoes never hurt anything like this, because the acid plays well with that sweet squash. And when you're doing that, all you're doing is adding nutrition. I happen to have collard greens in my garden. They've lasted all winter, and they're so gorgeous right now, because collard greens, the leaves can get really, really big and tough. But the leaves now are about this big, and they're just right. And they're great in soup because they keep their shape. There's a bite to them, but they keep their color, and they don't just go to mush. So play. Do any of you have questions while we're waiting for the soup to cook? About anything? Well, about cooking. Just think about when we have a kitchen and I can let you taste this.
Are we going to have a kitchen in your new place?
In the new library, there will be a commercial kitchen.
Wow.
And in that case, what I would have done, sometimes I go up to the college and I make a sample. Because in order to let you taste it, I have to cook it in a licensed kitchen. But I would have come down here this afternoon, made a batch so that there would be some for you to taste. And and so we wouldn't have to wait for it. Well, and you still can't taste it, so it's so frustrating. It's horribly frustrating for me not to allow
Because when
you,
you're cooking.
encourage
Yeah,
you
yeah.
to taste it, because
It
it's,
smells really good.
yeah, you have to.
I like it smells.
Smells so good.
Doesn't it? Yeah,
I
the
just want to go home and make it.
What's the difference between poblano and
I'm sorry, I forget.
the difference between the chilies, the poblano and anchovy? No,
Anchovy.
Anaheim.
Oh, Anaheim. Anaheims are, they're real long and green. They look like Hatch Valley green chilies, but they're sweet. They're not hot.
On their own?
They're shaped like this.
Okay.
And then the poblanos are a little fatter, and they're very dark green. But the Anaheims are pale green. They're what you get in a in a can of diced green chilies. That's Anaheims. But the poblanos are not hot. They have a little bit of a bittery edge to them. But I have all my marbles. I have this silly little cookbook that's shaped like a pumpkin. And it has a whole bunch of pumpkin recipes in it, pumpkin / squash. And that's where the recipe with the chilies comes from. It has the best recipe. It's just astonishing. They used to have these, racks on the counter at the bookstore, and they'd have a tomato one that was shaped like a tomato, and pumpkin shaped like a pumpkin, and so on like that. And darned if those weren't the best recipes.
Yeah.
You never know where you're going to find a good recipe.
I'm fairly unexperienced when it comes to cooking. What are some of your favorite ways, if any, to prepare squash that isn't soup?
In soup or?
Besides soup. How else do you
besides
prepare
soup.
Squash?
Well, my mother would have cut one of those acorns in half and put sugar and butter, cinnamon. I can't remember if it was cinnamon or not,
Or
but
nutmeg.
brown sugar, a little brown sugar and butter and cinnamon, which is totally unnecessary because they're very sweet.
Yeah.
But that's kind of a classic. With the delicatas, again, just bake, well, when you bake them, put them on a sheet face down, and then they steam up. Otherwise, they can dry out more than you might want them to. And when they steam, they probably cook faster that way too. Go online, which I did today. It was really fun. And there must have been 6 million squash recipes on there that, oh dear.
Did we just lose the power?
Nope, it still has power. It just says HOE. So I'll turn it off, or turn it back on again. It's fine, it just got tired. What can I say?
It smells so good now.
Yeah.
It smells so good.
Yes, it's
The
just
soup.
delicious, yeah.
Oh, this, I could probably, just so I can show you, I think it's soft enough. Probably at home I'd give it another 10 or 15 minutes, but I can This is a gadget, and mostly I hate gadgets, and this is wonderful. This is a tool, not a
Yeah.
gadget. If I had to puree this in a blender, it would be dangerous for one thing. You have to be really careful and only fill it this far and do it in batches. And it would be beautifully smooth, but it's a big fat mess.
It is.
And in the processor, it wouldn't blend enough. It would have too, actually, I don't mind some texture, but if you want a really smooth soup, you want to do it with either a blender or one of these babies. And people use these with gravy, and, you know, whatever you want to get smooth that's in the pot without taking it out and messing around with it. You just have to be careful. I should, did you see it before it was, before it even got this cooked? And, you know, that isn't particularly attractive. It's not horrible, but it's just not very attractive. So, it's nicer to have a deeper pan to do this in. This is not a good pureeing pan.
So when if you use lentils, you would add okay, so if you added lentils, you would do that and let them cook with everything else and then puree it with the lentils?
No. I might cook them separately and dump them in. And not brown lentils.
No,
I would use red or yellow, because red or yellow lentils cook down and get squishier. If you pull it out, it's like sticking one of these into the blender. It's all over the place. The one at the college is about probably 3 feet long. I always used to say you could put it behind a boat and troll with the immersion blender. But boy, it's just, and especially when you're cooking commercially, you know, in huge amounts, it really, really gets together. This isn't as smooth as it will get if I weren't impatient, but this soup is really nice with croutons, because you've got this lovely soup, maybe, I don't know, I was starting to say rye coupons, but with some of those, like with the warm and spice one, it would be really nice with rye ones. I don't see any reason to open the can. If you're gonna put, this is when you would put the cream in. At the Asia Mart, which is down by La Bamba, do you know where that is? It's a little tiny Asian grocery store, mostly Philippine. It's across from the Riverside Health Club. There's a strip mall.
Yeah.
And it's, I think Asia Mart is the last one, just a little shop. They have 5.5 ounce cans of coconut milk.
Oh,
And that's about how much I usually want to use.
yeah.
If I open one of these, then I freeze half of it or whatever. But
Oh. Very
Be
cool.
that as
Good
it
to know.
may, it's not gonna come out to exactly half a cup. And half of this isn't gonna come to a half a cup, and it doesn't.
Yeah.
Just use the whole little can, or, and you could use the whole big can of this, there's no reason not to.
How would that change the flavor profile if you use too much coconut
It
milk?
wouldn't change the
No?
profile, but it would, you'd probably taste the coconut, but
Coconut
you,
more than-
you wouldn't taste the coconut with a little can or with a
Okay,
half.
right.
Can you
Yeah.
tip it so I can see what it looks like?
Yes, absolutely. No, I want you to come up and look at it. I'm also gonna use white,
Oh, okay.
What is that?
white pepper in it rather than black pepper because,
Good color.
you know, if I have this beautiful soup, I want it to stay beautiful without black specks in it, but it has nothing to do with anything except how it looks. The other thing is, let's see, it probably needs more salt. If I know anything. Yes. Ugh. But it's interesting, I think there's a little heat in this curry because it's a little bit, this could also use some serious heat, you know, a little cayenne. Another thing that just really, really helps things like soups and stews and curries and like that is some lemon juice. And what it does, you can spend the day putting salt in a soup and you can't get enough in there. It just, you're fighting a losing battle. And what it is it's not salty, it's just out of balance. And lemon will pull it into balance. And it's, if you drink wine, it's that sweet acid balance, and it makes all the difference. It's astonishing. If you have a beef stew or a beef barley soup or something, put a tablespoon of red wine vinegar in it. And it's the same thing, it's just pulling it into balance, that acid. See, that's why I want you to taste it. So, because it's always just such a shock because that makes so much difference. Whoa.
It makes it bright.
Yes, that's a good
Yeah.
word. It
Yeah.
brightens it right up. And you begin to taste things you didn't taste before, like, well, let's see. The library staff's going to eat this tomorrow, so I don't want to contaminate it, but it made it a little tart, but I can also taste the apple now, which I couldn't the first time around.
So when would you put in the apple concentrate?
Well, if I'm, right now,
Oh, okay, as you're trying to balance.
yeah,
the
and if
flavors.
I'm
Okay.
balancing the,
Yeah.
because that's dead sweet, you know, that's,
Yeah.
so. So anyway, go home and make some of this stuff. It's really, really good, and it's so good for you. I don't know if your kids will like it, but. Do you have kids?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, who do you have to please? Well, with you, all right, go for it. It's,
If I added too much lemon, could I counteract that with the apple concentrate?
yes,
Okay.
right, but not with sugar. I'd be scared of sugar at that point.
Yeah.
Suzanne, do you have any tips on using the immersion blender?
Yeah, don't use it in that pan.
I
It
always
has to be
feel
a
like
deeper
I'm
pan.
doing it wrong.
Well, you know what happens if you think you're doing like this and it comes up and
Yeah.
Right.
it flows through those holes. I think what it is patience. You just have to be patient. It's a regular blender does it like that, and this doesn't.
Is it okay if it touches the bottom of the...
Yeah, because look, it's recessed.
Okay.
It's recessed about almost an inch, below the blade. So, yeah, you just kind of touch it to the bottom, and that's how you steer it around the pan, is with this part, because and then the blade pulls it in and pushes it out through
Okay.
those windows. It's a great thing. I got this at Hagen with stamps.
It's that.
They have this thing where if you buy a certain amount of whatever, you got a certain number of stamps, and you filled a little book, just like the old days of green,
green
S&H green stamps. And I don't know, I probably wouldn't own one if I hadn't gotten it that way,
That's fun.
because I wouldn't have known how much I wanted one,
Yeah.
or even needed one. Needed one, maybe not, but it's a really, really nice tool.
I think we all just want to sit here and smell that. Yeah, I know, yeah, I want to taste it. No, I want to taste it, I'll have to wait.
Oh, yeah. And the smoother it is, and that's the other thing, is the milk kind of smooths it. It changes the texture.